You are not failing because you lack information. You already know what you should be doing. You have known for a while, and yet the bank account looks the same this month as it did 6 months ago. The stress is the same. The end of the month arrives before the money does, again, and you cannot fully explain why. Here is what no one in the self-help world wants to say clearly. Hard work alone will not fix this. Because the problem is not above the surface. The problem is buried underneath it, running automatically right now, in the part of your mind you cannot see or control with effort. In 1938, Napoleon Hill gave this force a name. He called it the hypnotic rhythm, a law so precise that it takes every repeated pattern of thought and crystallizes it into automatic destiny. Poverty thinking, scarcity fear, the reflexive belief that there will never be enough. It freezes all of it into your default operating mode. And today, modern neuroscience has confirmed what he saw. They call it crystallized neural pathways. Same law, different language. Stay with this. What follows is going to explain your entire financial life, and then show you the exact mechanism to rewrite it. Most people are carrying a belief so deeply embedded they have never once stopped to question it. The belief goes like this: if you work hard enough, long enough, stay disciplined, stay consistent, the money will eventually come. It sounds reasonable, and it is incomplete in a way that costs people everything. Napoleon Hill spent more than 20 years inside the minds of the wealthiest, most productive people in American history. What he found did not match the cultural story. The gap between those who accumulated real wealth and those who worked themselves to exhaustion without gaining ground. That gap was not talent. It was not opportunity. It was not even how many hours they put in. It was the invisible program operating underneath every decision, every response to risk. Every moment a door opened and something inside them quietly closed it. Consider the person running 2 jobs, waking before dawn, skipping rest, and still unable to get ahead. From the outside, the commitment looks real. But inside, running constantly in the background, money is hard to hold. People in my position do not get wealthy. Success like that is for someone else. That inner script is not a motivation problem, it is a wiring problem. Notice the difference. That matters. Modern neuroscience confirms what Hill intuited without laboratory equipment. When a thought or behavior is repeated consistently over time, the brain begins coating that neural pathway with a substance called myelin, essentially insulation around the signal wire. The pathway gets faster, more automatic, more dominant. The pattern starts firing before conscious thought even gets involved. Researchers call these crystallized neural pathways. Let that sink in for a moment. Poverty thinking is not a mood you can push through. It is a physical structure inside your brain, built one repeated thought at a time, now operating faster than your willpower can interrupt it. This is exactly what Hill was describing decades before the biology was documented. The conscious mind wants more. But the crystallized pathway is executing an older program, written years ago, often before you had any say in what was being written. And here is the part this video will fully answer. If the pattern is physical, it can be physically changed. But that change cannot be forced by willpower alone. It requires a different mechanism entirely. One Hill not only identified, but documented with precise, repeatable steps. Napoleon Hill introduced the hypnotic rhythm in his 1938 work, Outwitting the Devil, a manuscript so confrontational that his wife refused to allow its publication during their lifetimes. It sat hidden for more than 70 years before the world finally read what he had written. In it, Hill described what he called the force of drift. Not a religious concept, a law. The invisible current that captures every person who moves through life without definite purpose and carries them, without resistance, toward the permanent reinforcement of whatever patterns they already have. Good patterns, destructive ones. It makes no distinction. His language in that work was precise and, frankly, alarming. He wrote that nature uses hypnotic rhythm to make permanent every habit of thought, whether constructive or destructive. Every act, every desire, every repeated thought is picked up by this cosmic force, classified, and returned to its source as its exact equivalent. Read that once more. Every thought you repeat about money, about yourself, about what is possible, classified, and returned to you as experience. Hill's interviews with Andrew Carnegie revealed a conviction Carnegie held with absolute certainty. Most people never accumulate wealth not because opportunity avoids them, but because they never make a clear, irrevocable decision to do so. They drift in the direction of wealth the same way a leaf moves downstream, without direction, without authority, at the mercy of whatever current is already running. Pay attention now. Thomas Edison approached this from a completely different angle. Edison did not believe in genius as most people understand it. He believed in a mind trained, through relentless repetition and definite purpose, to classify obstacles as information instead of defeat. His response to 10,000 failed experiments was not a display of emotional endurance. It was a description of neural architecture. He had, through sustained repetition, crystallized a pathway that defaulted to persistence rather than retreat. That pathway ran automatically. He did not have to choose it fresh every morning. Henry Ford stated it even more bluntly. Whether you think you can or you think you cannot, you are right. Not as a poetic observation, as a mechanical description of how the programmed mind operates. The man whose subconscious is running a scarcity program will, with extraordinary efficiency, find confirmation of scarcity everywhere he looks. Every news cycle, every slow month, every missed connection. His filter will surface these and ignore everything that contradicts them. The ancient scriptures said it long before Hill or Ford ever put it in words. In the letter to the Romans, the writer declared, "Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind." The renewing, not the improving, not the motivating, the renewing. The ancient understanding was already pointing to replacement, not effort. The diagnosis is complete. What comes next is where the remedy lives. The brain you have today is not permanent. That single fact changes everything. The discovery is called neuroplasticity, the brain's confirmed capacity to physically restructure itself in response to repeated thought and deliberate behavior. This is not a metaphor for feeling better. This is measurable, observable biological change in the physical tissue of the brain. The Reticular Activating System, the RAS, sits at the base of your brainstem, a dense cluster of neurons spanning from the medulla oblongata upward through the midbrain, with projections reaching into the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and the cortex itself. This system filters the approximately 2 million bits of sensory information your nervous system processes every second, reducing them to the roughly 140 pieces your conscious mind actually perceives. The criteria for that filter is not random. It is calibrated to whatever your dominant thought patterns have told the brain is worth noticing. A mind running a poverty program has an RAS tuned to confirm scarcity. Economic bad news. The gap between what you earn and what you need. The person whose opportunity you just missed. The RAS will surface these reliably, automatically, and without asking your permission. Here is the turn. Reprogram the dominant thought, and the filter recalibrates. The same world, the same environment, the the same contacts. But now, the RAS is surfacing opportunity, connection, and possibility it was previously screening out. Your external circumstances do not change first. Your filter changes first. And then, the world you were already living in begins to look different. This is not inspiration. This is anatomy. Napoleon Hill built his Law of Autosuggestion around this exact mechanism. Decades before neuroimaging existed to confirm what he was describing. He defined autosuggestion as the medium through which the conscious mind communicates to the subconscious. And he was deliberate about the mechanics. Write a specific financial goal with a specific number and a specific date. Not, I want more money. A number, a date, a commitment with edges. Then charge that statement with genuine emotion, because the subconscious does not process cold logic. It responds to feeling. Then repeat it, twice daily, with full conviction. Once before sleep. Once before the day's noise takes over. Every repetition sends a signal down the same neural pathway. Every emotionally charged repetition adds reinforcement to that route. Over time, the new pathway becomes dominant. The brain begins defaulting to the new pattern the same way it once defaulted to the old one. That is not theory. That is how the biology works. Modern science did not just confirm what Hill taught. It gave us the vocabulary to understand why the poverty pattern is so extraordinarily stubborn. Behavioral economics, the discipline studying how psychological patterns drive financial decisions, has documented what researchers call the scarcity mindset. When a person is operating under consistent financial stress, cognitive bandwidth measurably contracts. Studies from Princeton and Harvard found that the psychological weight of financial scarcity functions like a direct tax on available intelligence, absorbing mental resources that would otherwise support planning, creativity, and long-term decision-making. Read that carefully. Poverty thinking is not simply a symptom of being poor. It is a cause. The person under financial stress is not just dealing with difficult external circumstances. They are operating with a brain that has been shaped, biologically, neurologically, to perpetuate those same conditions. Stress reduces planning capacity. Reduced planning produces worse financial outcomes. Worse outcomes confirm the original fear. The loop tightens and accelerates. This is exactly what Hill called the addiction to poverty. Not a moral failing. A habitual pattern so deeply grooved that the mind actively resists any input that would disrupt it, because disruption feels like danger, and the brain's first job is protection, not growth. Expect resistance. That resistance is the old pathway defending its territory. This is precisely where Earl Nightingale enters the conversation. Nightingale, one of the founding figures of the modern personal development movement, spent decades translating Hill's work for post-war audiences who needed the principles stated plainly, without philosophy. His conclusion, recorded in 1956 in what became the first spoken-word recording to earn gold record status, was stripped to its essential truth. We become what we think about, not what we work for. What we consistently, dominantly, habitually think about. The mind does not evaluate the quality of what is planted. It grows whatever is fed with consistency and emotional charge. Plant scarcity thoughts with repetition, and the mind grows the conditions that match scarcity. Plant a specific, emotionally charged, deliberately repeated thought of abundance, and the mind begins constructing the neural architecture that makes abundance the default. Now, layer in what behavioral economists call loss aversion. Research has repeatedly confirmed that the brain weights a potential loss nearly twice as heavily as an equivalent potential gain. This is why people stay in failing financial situations far longer than logic would support. The fear of losing what little exists outweighs the perceived value of gaining something better. Loss aversion feeds the poverty paradigm. The poverty paradigm deepens the loss aversion. That cycle does not break on its own. It requires exactly what Hill prescribed: a definite chief aim, emotionally charged and mechanically repeated, strong enough to override the default fear response with a new dominant program. You now understand something most people spend an entire lifetime never seeing clearly. The problem was never effort. It was never intelligence or ambition or the right opportunity at the right time. The problem was the program running underneath all of that. The crystallized pathway, the hypnotic rhythm, the poverty pattern encoded through years of repetition and emotional reinforcement before most people ever had a chance to examine it. And now you know it can be changed. Through mechanism, through consistent, deliberate, emotionally engaged repetition applied to a new dominant thought. Here is what the science actually says about the timeline. Peer-reviewed research covering more than 2,600 participants found that habit formation takes an average of 66 days, with individual ranges spanning anywhere from 4 weeks to nearly a year, depending on the complexity of the behavior and the consistency of the practice. Some pathways shift faster. Some require longer sustained effort. The honest answer is that the process is not completed in 3 weeks, but it begins immediately, from the very first repetition. That beginning matters. Start today with what Hill called good abandonment. Every time the impulse arises to rehearse a financial complaint about what is missing, about how far behind things feel, replace it with one specific, concrete financial planning action. Research one income source. Write down one step toward a real goal. Review one number you have been avoiding. The action does not need to be large. It needs to be real, and it needs to be deliberate. Each deliberate replacement is a repetition on the new pathway. Each repetition makes the next one slightly easier. Over weeks and months of consistent practice, what was effortful becomes automatic. That is neuroplasticity working exactly the way Hill said it would. Use the law of autosuggestion as your daily instrument. Write the specific number. Set the specific date. Read it with full emotional conviction, morning and night. Do not debate the doubt when it surfaces. Simply continue the practice. The pathway is being built whether the old pattern objects or not. This is the metaphysical resolution. You are not a passive product of your circumstances. You are the active architect of the dominant thought pattern that generates those circumstances. Change the dominant thought through deliberate, sustained, emotionally charged repetition. And you do not simply feel differently. The filter changes. The default changes. And then the actions that produce different outcomes begin happening naturally, because the mind is now running a different program. Seal this now. Infinite intelligence, universal substance, divine mind. You who govern the laws of thought and the laws of harvest, who designed the mind to reproduce and experience whatever it consistently receives, we release the hypnotic rhythm of scarcity. We plant, with full emotional conviction and deliberate purpose, the dominant thought of abundance, of clarity, of directed wealth. We ask that this new pathway be strengthened through each day of consistent practice, each morning repetition, each deliberate replacement of fear with specific purpose. We receive this not as wishful hope, but as established law. And so it is. If something in this teaching has shifted the way you see your own mind, if the mechanism finally makes sense in a way that other content has not reached, then you are exactly where you need to be. This channel exists for people who are finished drifting. People ready to engage Napoleon Hill's laws with the precision and commitment they require. Subscribe now. Join this community of conscious builders. Every week, we go deeper into the laws of the mind, the science of wealth, and the ancient wisdom that produced the greatest fortunes in human history. Napoleon Hill left us this: whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Conceive it with clarity. Believe it with the full weight of deliberate repetition. Then move with purpose, with direction, and with a mind that has been consciously, systematically rewired for the life you have already decided to build.